All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's masterclass. Today, we're going to be doing a recap on set 10 as the set is coming to an end, with Worlds even being this weekend. So going into set 11, we're going to need to be having some things conscious in our mind regarding comps, regarding itemizations, augments. So we'll talk about what we learned from set 10 and how to apply it for the next sets. I see there's some new faces in the Discord, so if you are having any questions, feel free to unmute your mic or type in the VC chat. I'll be happy to answer them, or wait till the end for any big questions. And if you're watching this on the YouTube, make sure you check out the Training Grounds Discord channel so you can check out these classes live, ask any questions, and get the full experience there. So let's get straight into it. A couple topics today. So we're going to be talking about augments and items as mentioned, and then a couple key things that we learned specifically from set 10. We're going to be talking about melee bruiser positioning. Edgelords played a big factor in the set, especially across a couple cups as well. So we're going to be talking about what to do there. And then last but not least, stall comps. There were a couple stall comps in today's or in this set. There were a couple of fast-paced comps as well, but nothing crazy like assassins. So we'll talk about how to play stall comps, what counters them, and itemization, positioning, everything in general. Then we're going to finish off with a reflection, any Q&A, and that's it. So set 10 recap, let's get straight into it. First off, I want to talk about augments. So augments are coming to set 11, that's been confirmed, and there are a lot of new augments. So although we don't know the description of them yet, we're going to have to keep a couple things in mind because certain augments, although they might be named different, they'll still have similar effects to current augments. So knowing how to play around that is really important. First off, we'll talk about what augments do, right? So they amplify the power of a board. This is in a couple different ways, either A, through just the combat power. So this can be either just through items, this can be through boosting the power of a certain trait, or just the stats of your units. Second way they help you out is economically. So there's a lot of econ augments. They either give you gold or more rolls, which is in form gold. Or last but not least, augments, they just fill gaps in your team. Maybe you're missing healing reduction, right? And then you get blistering strikes. Or maybe you're missing sunder and shred and you're playing executioners. Then you get sunder and shred. So a couple different things that augments can help you out with, and they're really helpful. But we need to we need to know how to pick the best option, because although most augments will always give you like some sort of value, like taking most of these augments, even if you take the wrong one, it'll still provide some sort of value to your board, even if it's very small. But we need to make sure we're picking the best option in order to maximize our strength and efficiency of our board. So that is just augments in general. We'll have a quick 3-step process to really help you figure out which augment to pick. So step 1 is analyze your current state. So although you only have a set amount of time when this 2-1, 3-2, or 4-2 happens to actually pick the right augment and then even make your board after, we want to quickly check out our current state. So I'll talk about how to do that and what that entails. Actually, I'll go through that first because it's on the slide. So first off, as soon as the augment comes, so let's say 2-1 or 3-2, 4-2, you just need to pause real quick and check out your board and actually figure out what would benefit your board, right? What would actually positively benefit it? So influencing factors would be your current augments. So maybe this isn't 2-1, you already have an augment and it's 3-2. So check out what your 2-1 augment already provides, any items, units, or even the region, right? So let's say it's 2-1 and you checked out your board, you have a strong opener, right? So we want to be taking a combo augment, trying to get that 5 streak going instead of a lose streak augment. And then vice versa. If we have a really weak board, then we don't want to be taking augments that would require you to have a strong opener, such as Escort Quest. A couple other examples, not taking Tiny Titans if you're win streaking 100 HP. Sometimes this is right, especially in tournament. If you're just playing for a 4th or even just like a decent placement, then you just bleed out. But if you are win streaking 100 HP, ideally you want to keep pushing that win streak, taking a combo augment, and keep pushing your advantage, keep tempoing the lobby. And then other things to keep in mind that really would come up from just like checking out what you have and how like the current region or items units that affect it, right? So let's say an option such as or a region such as the double item carousel, then I would probably, or actually not probably, you would not want to take more item augments, because then you're going to have an overload on items, and you'd rather either take augments that boost having a lot of items or just the actual stats of your team, because items that checklist, or it's already checked on your checklist having itemized carries because you'll have extra items from the carousel. So these are certain things that you could think about. As soon as the augment comes, just currently check out your state, see what you have, what you need, what would actually help you out, and the most effective options. So step 2 is going to be review your checklist. I'll talk about that on the next slide. And then last but not least, you're going to pick your optimal augment based off these or reroll your choices and repeat the process. So it's very simple. You want to analyze what you have currently, review your checklist, which I'll talk about in a second, and then from those two options, pick your most optimal choice or reroll and then go again. So here is our checklist. This is very general. These are just factors that you want presence in every game on your board. So you want to have some sort of healing for your team and shred or sunder, depending on the main damage source of your board. So if it's physical damage, you want sunder. If it's magic damage, you want shred, of course. You want to have some sort of enemy healing reduction, either from an item, either from an augment, either from a unit. And then last but not least, you need to have a solid mix between ally damage and frontline tank. So this is your checklist. Make sure you check out what you already have and then what you still need. So then as an example I gave earlier, right, if you have no healing reduction, then blistering strikes is perfect for you. If checks out the enemy healing reduction part in your checklist. And also this just helps fill the gaps. Damage but no frontline, well then we need frontline, right? So we'll item or augments such as crash test dummies are really good. And then if you have no healing, and especially if you're playing a melee carry, then augments such as Harmless or Vampirisms will help you out. So first off, as I mentioned, check out what you already have, and then see what you still need. And then from there, you can make your choice, select the most optimal augments that you currently have, or reroll and then repeat the same process. So this is our final point. Like if none of these augments are applicable or helpful after you checked out what you already have and what you need, then reroll your choices and then repeat the analysis process. So this 3-step process of analyze, review, and then select or reroll will really help you choose the most optimal augment that you have at the time. So very last tips regarding augments. So we all know that throughout the duration of the game, right, your team size will increase, even if it's just by a little bit or even slower if you're re-rolling. Team size will always increase throughout the duration of the game. So what does this mean? It means that early game, the early augments that are really strong, they're centered around either items or individual unit/trait buffs. So what this means is because at the very start of the game, there's very small amounts of items that everybody has, right? As compared to the mid part of the game and especially late part of the game. Early game, there's very few items. So then we can find our main power source from having additional items from our augments, as opposed to having augments that benefit the entire team, right? Because our team size is very small early. So this means that augments such as like, roll the dice, or even like lucky streak, right? These provide items early that other boards will not have, and this can help really boost the strength of your board early. And then opposite, right? Later into the game, when we have like a team size of 7, a team size of 8, now team-wide augments such as Gifts from the Fallen or Unified, these have a lot more value as opposed to early in the game when you only have 3 or 4 units, right? So now we have almost double the values of gifts, like 8 versus 4, and we just have more units to actually benefit from Unified as opposed to just our 3 or 4 early game. So that's for items, and then I want to talk about individual units or trait buffs. So now we look at the best performing augments onto one, at least on this patch. So Submit to the Pit, this is a trait buff, right? Rampant Rhythm, trait buff. Hologram is just, it just gives you a full extra unit, so that's why it's good early, but like Blinged Out, right? So a lot of these are not team, not necessarily, they're more trait buffs rather than the entire team is benefiting from it. So just keep in mind that early game, right, items or individual buffs or like trait buffs, and then late game augments such as gifts or unified are better, things that benefit the entire team because your team is larger near the end of the game, or at least like later into the game. So that's another thing to note regarding augment optimization. And then that's it for augments. So keep this in mind as we're going to set 11. There's probably going to be a lot of new augments, and we need to make sure that we are filling in the gaps. We are doing our 3-step process to really help us pick the right augments, and hopefully that will help us out. So the next part I want to talk about is itemization. So now that we've got augments out of the way, we need to optimize our items as well. So itemization can be influenced by a couple things, especially for units. It could be their traits and their abilities. So something to keep in mind, right? Going into this new set, perhaps there's a trait that gives a lot of AD, or there's a trait that gives a lot of AP, or like crit chance, right? These are all potential options. And this will affect the itemization of our units. So this is kind of the first way of figuring out like, oh, what would be the best item for my units? And technically the second way is to go on tactics tools, check out the stats, and then just follow the stats. But it's still really good to figure out on your own, or at least like understand why something is good on a unit, rather than just accepting like, oh, the stats say this is the best, so I'm just going to build this, etc. So that's how we really figure out the itemization of units. And then next, stats are multiplicative in TFT. So it's better to have an equal distribution of many beneficial stats to a unit rather than just stacking like one stat really hard. So instead of just stacking like 80 on a unit, we want to have a nice mix of attack damage, attack speed, crit, damage amp. If they're frontline, or at least melee, they want to have some sort of healing as well. So we want to really equally distribute the stats rather than just stack one stat a lot, due to the multiplicativeness of stats in TFT. So that's a quick intro and a quick intro into itemization. We're going to talk about trait influenced itemization first. So our two examples, we'll technically have more later, but let's say like Caitlyn and Ahri, right? So let's look at Caitlyn first, 8 bits and rapid fire. So although, yes, the set is coming to an end, this is just an example of something that we could go through, or you could go through during the new set, because in the new set, there's going to be like 2 new traits, right? Or maybe even a 3 traded unit. And we want to figure out like, okay, what stats do these traits already give the units, and then what do I want to build on top of that to really like make this unit the most efficient? So in this case, right, we gain bonus AD and bonus attack speed for our Caitlyn. So AD is already checked, and then attack speed is already checked. So the other things that Caitlyn would benefit from is now damage amp, right? There's no percentage bonus damage amp acquired from 8-bit or rapid fire, so that's something we want to get. And then this unit is front to back, so Giant Slayer is a must, right? So this is just the thought process of how to figure out like, oh, what would actually benefit this unit. Okay, damage spread is really good because we have so much bonus AD, so then an item like Runons would be really good. And then last but not least, Deathblade is just good in general because bonus damage amp. And also, although I said you don't necessarily want to just be hard stacking one stat, it's okay to like, I guess, mildly stack it. For example, like we're building pure AD, although it has the bonus damage amp, that's why I think this is fine. But building an AD item on an AD champ is still good, right? Building an AP item on an AP champion or unit is still very good. We just don't want to be building just 3 flat AD items on an AD champion, or like 3 flat AP items on an AP unit. We want to be having a good mix, but in this case, this is just very good in general as well. So that's the first way we wanted, I guess, debunk the itemization of a unit. And then second one, let's say Ahri, right? So KDA and Spellweaver, just from reading, okay, so health check, ability power check, attack damage check. Well, Ahri doesn't really use attack damage. And then health, although she's a backline carry, so we're not going to be building like tank items on her anyway. So main thing from KDA is bonus AP. Okay, great. So for the first part of her trait gives her bonus AP. The second one, okay, a little bit of flat AP and then scaling, right? So now we know that, okay, this unit receives bonus AP and scaling AP. So although every unit will be different depending on their like ability or their mana pool, now we know that this unit in general just has a lot of AP already built into her, right? So then just based off this unit in specific, because her mana is 30, we're like, okay, well, we're going to need blue buff, right? And then so that brings us down to 20. So like mana gen, and then fight stall / team sustained, because we have scaling AP. So then we want the fight to drag on. The longer the fight goes, the stronger our board gets, because the more damage our Ahri will deal with Spellweaver. And then just attack speed. This is a unit like specific item, but this is just another way that we want to really figure out the itemization for this unit, right? The worst thing we can do is just build additional flat AP on her. So something like an Archangels is absolutely really bad on Ahri, because we already have so much AP coming from KD and so much AP coming from Spellweaver that giving her more AP is less beneficial than her casting more often, or at least like healing her team and stalling. Rabadon's is a little bit better because of the recent change of it actually giving 20% bonus damage amp. However, other items are still better, and you already get so much AP from these two traits that you don't want to be building additional AP. So this is the thought process of equally distributing the beneficial stats of a unit rather than just hard stacking one stat. So other examples like Big Shot Ezreal, right? Big Shot Ezreal or Heartsteel doesn't give any statistics. So then trait offers a lot of 80. So now we want attack speed, mana gen, spell crit, amplifiers, and we can see that from the top 3 items, or even the 4th item. So then like blue buff, red buff, Infinity Edge, we see this very often, Giant Slayer, right? However, items such as Deathblade are not as good. Ginsu's is not as good, specifically for Ezreal, because he's more ability based than auto attack based. But this is another way that you can really verify the items of a unit. Apart from just thinking through it and then like analyzing like the trait and then what would be beneficial, just check on tactics tools to like confirm your suspicions or confirm your ideas and see what has the lowest delta, and you'll figure out like, oh, okay, this is best in slot on this unit. So this is another example for Ezreal. And then last but not least, Country Samira is like, okay, the trait gives us Omnivamp and attack speed. So then we want to benefit from other things like spell crit, attack damage, and amplifiers. So then items such as like Infinity Edge or like Deathblade are really good. Last Whisper for Sunder because we're doing physical damage. Giant Slayer we're front to back. So this is just another example of figuring out what a unit needs. So now that we've gone through trait-based, I want to talk about ability-influenced. So we talked about like the influence that a trait has on a unit and how that influences their itemization. Now I want to talk about their ability. So there's, in this example, there's 2 types of ability activates, right? The first one is like instant damage, instant output of damage, and then we have uptime, a bonus damage. So our examples are Yone and Riven, as you see here. And early into the set, maybe even if you didn't play this these 2 comps very often, you're like, okay, I'm gonna build the same items, and then whatever first one I hit, I'll just put the items on them. But you see how drastically different these item builds are. So Yone is instant output of damage, right? As soon as he gets to his full mana bar, he'll instantly output a large amount of damage. So this is why we want things to, we want the ability to crit. Okay, if we want it to crit and we need healing, then Hodge is a perfect duo for these 2 items to pair together. And then last but not least, we'd want a defensive item, right? Because Yone is a 1-range unit, so he's melee bruiser, or in this case, he's more of a melee assassin, but we'll just say melee, right? So then we want a defensive item, either a Edge of Night into burst comps, or more of a Titans into scaling comps, or comps that don't have the damage threshold to kill us. So then this is how you'd itemize a unit such as Yone. So in set 11, if we see a unit that has an instant output of damage and their melee, we're like, okay, their ability does a lot of damage, right? It's their main damage output. We're gonna want that to crit. Okay, if they're melee and we need healing and we want them to crit anyway, then these 2 would be a good pair. And then we'd see like, okay, do they have maybe AP scaling, or where Titans is good and the fight drags on a little bit longer, or are we sending them like right in front of the enemy carry and we're going to need like an aggro drop, or are they going to die very easily? So this is something to keep in mind for instant outputs of damage as opposed to uptime, right? Riven activates her ability. It's not an instant output of damage where you would want it to crit right away, right? Now she deals more damage to the target she's attacking and AoE. So we have X amount of seconds for uptime. So then items such as a QS is better than an Edge of Night. And then since we're not building Infinity Edge, where our main ability is critting, then a Bloodthirster would be better. And we're more of a drain tank as opposed to like a melee assassin. And because we're a drain tank and hitting the front line, then items such as Giant Slayer would be better. So this is itemization based off one's ability. So remember, any unit that has uptime would really need to attack and really fully optimize the time that the uptime is present, hence being able to attack and go through any CC. Items like QS are very good for this. So that is for ability influence itemization compared to trait influence itemization. And then very last tips, regardless of whatever board you have, a little bit back to the checklist, right? You need healing reduction, sunder, and shred, or a sunder or shred depending on your board. But ideally you only have one source of this, so you don't need to be building like 2 sources of sunder. It's better to have 1 source of sunder and then to have a better item, or like 2 sources of healing reduction Same thing, it's just overkill, it doesn't stack. So you can use those components to build a better item. There are some cases where it's okay to have like 2 sources of Sunder, 2 sources of Shred, if it's not being spread enough, or if if one of the holders like dies very easily. So then you can have more of a consistent Sunder or Shred. But for most of the time, just 1 source is fine, and then use the remaining components to build a better item either for your frontline or for your backline carry. The next point for itemization is frontline. So let's say we do have the Sunder Shred. So this is Ionic Spark, or this is Even Shroud. They need to be the same side as your main carry. So if we're playing something like an 8-bit Riven, then the Caitlyn, the Riven needs to be on the same side as the Even Shroud Mordekaiser. If we're playing an AP board, so like let's say Spellweaver Annie or like Spellweaver Ari, then our Spark needs to be on the same side in front of our Ari or our Annie, our main damage, so then they can actually make use of that. And then also they need to be not targeted first, this frontline unit, so then the Sunder or Shred lives as long as possible, and we're able to really maximize the use of it, the effect of the item throughout the fight. And the very last general itemization tip, melee bruisers, they need healing or aggro drop. They're in much more danger than backline carries, so they definitely need healing either through itemization, maybe they already have it in their kits, or through an augment, and then aggro drop. So that's why you see like Edge of Night builds on Yone and builds on Yasuo so much. Is just very important for melees, as they can just randomly die just like that, and their damage is not very consistent. So that is for itemization. So we've talked about augment itemization or augment optimization. Then we talked about item optimization. We're going to now move on to melee bruiser positioning. So this is something that maybe half of the main carries in the upcoming set are going to be melee. So this is going to be something important to know. Let's say our example from our current set is like, we'll use Riven as an example. First thing we need to do when having our melee bruiser as our main carry is to not get stuck on the main enemy tank. We want to be targeting the weak side of the enemy board first, so we can kind of like rampage through it and hopefully access the backline. So first up, position away from the enemy main tank. This is the last thing that we want to hit, and the first thing that our enemy wants us to hit. Target the weak side of the enemy board, and especially if the main carry is hiding behind the weak front line, because then we could just bulldoze through and then really reach the enemy carry very easily. Kind of the same concept as I mentioned on the previous slide. Your main core of damage, so this is going to be your main tank, your main carries, especially if your main tank is holding a Sunder or a Shred item, they need to be the same side. So in this case, it's like the Mordekaiser, Riven, and Caitlyn, they need to be on the same side. Focus firing whatever this Riven is attacking, with the Mordekaiser tanking, and then applying the Sunder in a 2-hex radius. So then everything is getting armor reduced. And then last but not least, for melee bruisers, most of the time, because we have so much healing, because we have the sustain, and then hopefully some sort of durability, they have a hard time dying to AoE targets. Of course, they have a really easy time dying to single target damage. However, to AoE, they can sometimes drain tank it. So in this set, it was like Pentakill, Katarina, or like Seraphine. Not the Seraphine board if it was a strong Ari, but if it's a weak Ari, then it's fine. Just because AoE damage doesn't necessarily cut through our healing. So we can drain tank across this. The AoE damage doesn't reach a specific damage threshold in order to out damage our healing, and we can just it's basically a mana feed. So this is where mana feed comes, and then we can just like keep casting or keep attacking, and it's very good against AoE boards. And then vice versa, if you're facing a melee carry board, make sure you have some sort of single target damage, so then you can out damage their healing. Another example, so that was for Riven, something like a Yone versus an Ari. So in this case, like Ari is our main threat, she's single target damage, right? And then as I mentioned, our melee bruisers are I'll just say even melee carries, doesn't necessarily need to be a bruiser unit. Our melee carries are very susceptible to single target damage, so we need to position away, far away from the enemy main single target carry and the enemy main tank. It gets a little bit more complicated if they split it, because then it's like they're splitting their forces. But in that case, then you'd want to actually position away from the enemy main tank and then hopefully access the enemy carry. But something like this, right? The worst thing that our Yone can do is get stuck hitting this Blitzcrank and getting killed by this Ari. So then this is not guaranteed, but this is our best chances positioning away from the single target damage and hopefully killing the rest of the board and then making our way to the Ari. So this is how you'd position a melee carry in the new sets. Just keep this in mind. And then as shown in the previous example, if there are a lot of single target damage, in this, if there's a lot of single target damage and they can very like easily swap, so there's no hexes binding them to a specific side, make sure to second row your melee carry. You lose like half a second of damage as they walk up, but then this guarantees that they are not targeted first. Okay, and then our last topic for today, our last takeaway from set 10 that we're going to take into set 11 is playing stall comps. I'll talk a little bit about fast-paced comps as well, but stall comps, they're present in every set. In this case, it was a lot of disco, where the board gets stronger the longer a fight lasts. Comps such as these that are based off of stalling, they really need strong front line. Most of them, I think almost all of them, are front to back, where we basically want our front line to hold as long as possible, so then our scaling units can scale really really long. So we need a strong front line. We need some sort of sustain, either frontline sustain or a backline like item sustain, so like a gunblade. In this case, it's like trait sustain. And then some sort of scaling. Most of the time this is from our backline, and most of the time this is damage or attack speed, etc. This is just a concept, not a specific comp. It's a stall comp, can be many different comps. So that any scaling can really help, whether it's like damage, attack speed, etc. Yeah. Regarding positioning for stall comps, because we want the fight to last as long as possible, our main scaler needs to be away from the enemy main carry. So then the fight doesn't automatically get finished if our main carry accidentally dies or gets targeted first. So our main carry needs to be positioned away from the enemy main carry. Most of the time, let's say it's like an enemy backline. Then let's say the enemy main carry is in the top right corner. We want to be in the bottom left. So then create as much distance as possible. So then we are able to drown out the fight as long as possible. And then stall comps, what are their weaknesses? They're really weak to fast-paced comps. So this in the past used to be like assassins. So basically anything with back to front, any comp that plays back to front, or anything that has burst, because it's the complete opposite of what we want, right? We want the fight to last as long as possible, but back to front wants to target our backline, which is most of the time our scalers first. So then if our scaling unit is dead at the very start of the fight, then we have no more damage, we're doomed. Or burst, right? If they're able to burst through our defense as we were trying to scale, as we were trying to stall, then we are doomed as well. So if you are playing a fast-paced comp, you want to be positioned same side as the stall comp, so then you are able to reach their scalers as soon as possible and not let them scale. Another case like this is the Kale comp with Rageblade. In that case, the scaling is attack speed, which in form outputs as damage. So with Kale reroll, we'd also want to be positioned away from the enemy main carry. So then we are able to stall as long as possible, and our Kale will be targeted last. So that is everything for today. I will quickly recap everything. So today we talked about a couple of different topics. We talked about optimization for augments and items. Of course, items will always be in set or in TFT, so optimizing them is super important, but also augments are coming to set 11, so that is important as well to know. We weren't talking about anything specifically, we were just talking about concepts and how to approach new augments that come, or new items that come, or new units that come. We talked about how to position melee carries. Backline carry positioning is pretty, I guess, I don't want to say self-explanatory, but it's more simple. We're normally positioning in a corner unless we're against a board that has a specific function against that. So in the past it used to be like Blitzcrank hooks, or in this set it was like Lux lasers, where we need to not be in the corner. So that's why I want to talk about like melee positioning instead of backline positioning. And then we finished off with playing stall comps, how to play them, how to counter them, and if you're playing a fast-paced board, you're going to have a pretty easy time against a comp that wants the fight to be as slow as possible. So that is everything for today's class. I hope you learned something. I'm going to stop the recording now.